Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 165. Being is the week of Shabbos Parsha B'Halescha, and we're also in the Tashlumin, which is like the ways to complete and complement that which was missing in Shavuos. So we'll talk about those two elements. B'Halescha is one of the favorite parshas, even though you can't really say favorite on a parsha. One of the fundamental themes of the Rebbe is based on the Parsha B'Halescha. I discussed it a number of times, especially back in episode 119, but it's worthwhile addressing, maybe from a different angle, but the central theme is the first word in the Parsha B'Halescha, and that is that the mitzvah is being told to Aaron, HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, B'Halescha Sanedis, when you'll elevate, raise the flames. And the question that's asked, as Rashi immediately points out, the word should have been B'Hadlokoischa. You say Hadlokas Haneris, to kindle, to ignite, to light the flames. B'Halescha is a rare word, and seemingly is not fitting here. It means to raise the flames. Why not use B'Hadlokoischa, which is more direct, as we always use Hadlokas Haneris, Hadlokas Neres Shabbos, Hadlokas Neres Yontif. And Rashi explains, based on the Medrash, because the mitzvah was not just that he should ignite, not just he should kindle the flame, but he should also make sure the Kohen Gadol that the flame rises on its own, because it takes a split second until the flame catches. So he could think he could just move to the next flame immediately. No, wait and be patient, wait for that extra second for the flame to catch. So the obvious question that Rebbe asks, and the obvious question, the common sense question is, why is that so significant? What's the worst case scenario? He lights the flame, moves on to the next one. If it didn't catch or burns out, he can always go back and light it again. For that, the Torah has to go change a word. Every word is precise in the Torah. Is the expression, until the flame rises on its own. Why is that so significant? And the answer given by the Rebbe, a number of sikhs, especially B'Halescha Tov Shin Nun Aleph, which is the last B'Halescha Le'esat till now that we've heard, the last sikh that we heard from the Rebbe 26 years ago. The Rebbe says, because the lighting of the manator, let's begin with another question, a question answering another question with another question. Answering this question with another question. Why is the manator such a significant component in the Mishkan? We have many kelim in the Mishkan. There was obviously an Aron, the Ark, the Holy Ark, and the Holy of Holies. You have the manator, you have the Shulchan, the table. You have the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the Mizbeach HaKteris, which is the altar for the Kteris, which was in the Kedesh. You have the altar for the Karbonis. You have also the manator. Why does the manator stand out? Not only here in Parsha B'Halescha, but you also see it in Parsha Tetzava. That after Parsha Truma, where the whole Mishkan is described and all the kelim, then comes after Tetzava, that the special commandment of how you light the manator with Shemen Zayis Zoch, pure olive oil, Ner Tamid. You see manator stands out, and you see in Judaism in general, the manator seems to symbolize a lot more than the other kelim do. You have the manator, you have the manator of Chanukah, you have the manator of Shabbos, and manator is a significant, unique component. Why? Because manator reflects the purpose for which we were sent to this world, and that is to be walking manators, living manators that illuminate, to be neres lahoyer, in the words of the Rebbe Rashab, of flames that illuminate. Ner Hashem nishma sodom. The soul of a human being is the flame of God. And ner mitzvah v'teira er. And how do we light it? How do we kindle and ignite it? Is through the flame, through the candle of the mitzvah and the light of the Torah. And that is our mission, not just to light our own neshama through the light of Torah mitzvahs, but also to ignite and kindle every neshama, every person we come in contact with. This is the essence of chinuch, of education, to light another. Not to give them anything, not to create anything, to help ignite the flame that they already have burning inside them, that needs to be fanned, that needs to be fueled, that needs to be fed and nourished and cultivated. So you have two ways you can do this. One way is you ignite, you kindle, or you can do something even more. You can make them rise on their own, a flame that rises on its own. What does it mean specifically? In education, you can educate someone and give them facts and information, data. Then there's an education where you teach them methodology. Data and facts teaches them the answers to questions. You give them, here's the questions, here are the answers. Here's the data, here's the information. Methodology is you empower the person, the student, that even when he or she is not in your presence, and they don't have to call you to get an answer, you mean the teacher, and they have the methodology to be a flame that rises on its own. That's the mission of V'hemidu Talmidim Harba. What's V'hemidu Talmidim Harba in the beginning of Pirkei Avos? Why Himidu? Himid means to make them stand. You shall raise Himidu Talmidim, many students. You shall make stand many students upright. Why Himidu? Why not educate them? There are many words to be used because they're too to make them stand on their own feet. And that's far more than information and knowledge. That's empowerment, giving people the tools, not just the fish, but how to fish. Not just the havdil in Torah mitzvahs, not just the information, but how to find the answers. And that is the key thing in all education and all illumination and all inspiration and all education, all influence, is you can influence someone and you can influence them that they themselves own and they themselves develop and grow with it even when the teacher is no longer there. This is in the language of Chassidus, avoda b'keach atzmei. A effort, a work that is b'keach atzmei, not just b'keach hamashpia, not just with the power of the teacher, not just with the power of God for that matter, but b'keach atzmei. That's the whole, that there should be the ma'aseh yadecha tichseif. That Hashem wanted, the ma'aseh yadecha is ma'aseh yadecha, He wanted us to do what we have to do. And that's why you find in Torah constantly the effort, the concept of Adam reitze b'kav shalei yesu mitisha kav mishal chavere. A person has more desire in one kav, one measure that they earn on their own than nine measures that they receive. Gifts, nema dechsufa is considered bread of shame when you receive it as a gift. Matanas seinecha, you should not enjoy and take pleasure in gifts. Is because all of this indicates what a person has to do is the self-initiated, the self-generated effort, which has a tremendous power. This is a fundamental principle in Torah and Chassidus in general, and especially Chassidus Chabad, not tzaddik b'manasa yichaya, that not the yichya, but the yichaya, that you should have the ability to do it on your own. Not just the tzaddik does it for you, but everyone makes their effort in this regard. The same in the Rebbe, specifically you see from the first Fabring and Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, where the Rebbe focused on after the Maimer and made the statement where he said, you shouldn't deceive yourself into thinking that I'm going to do the work for you. I will not deprive you from helping, but basically I'll help those that help themselves, because everyone has their pekel, has their nefesh habamis, has their shtus deluma, the negative insanity, and everyone has to deal with their battles. And yes, we look for help. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? The Rebbe didn't cite that, but it's the same idea. If I'm only for myself, what am I? So we always need to have that self-generated effort, which is all hinted to in the word B'halescha. As a matter of fact, I may have shared this. If not, I'll share it again. If I have shared it, I'll share it again. If I haven't, so you'll hear it for the first time. When the last Fabring and B'halescha Tov Shanal, the Rebbe spoke at length about this theme. And in it, he spoke about the idea of free will. Is it truly free will? Because at the end of the day, God gives us everything. He gives us the free will. He gives us the resources. He gives us the strength. Mi'agdemani v'ashalom, meaning that He is the one that gives us all the tools to do the mitzvahs. So like the Kohen Gadol, is it really self-effort when Hashem gave us all the resources? Well, the same thing with the Kohen Gadol. Who's actually lighting the flame? At the end of the day is the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. So even though it's true the flame is now burning on its own, but even the wick and the flame and who ignited the flame all came from the Kohen Gadol. So where's the real self-generated effort? And yet we do know that Bechira means free will is a foundation in Judaism, that we have the ability to choose, we have the ability to take the initiative. And the Rebbe went back and forth in that Fabringen and B'halescha Tovshin Nun Aleph, as I said 26 years ago, this week, and it was not so clear the ultimate picture, how to reconcile the two. So we asked some questions and wrote some questions to ask to clarify this point by the Rebbe, which we had the opportunity to do. And on this side, the Rebbe wrote, the whole theme of the Fabringen was avoda b'keach atzmei, effort on your own, self-generated effort. And you're asking me to answer your questions. This was the only time we ever got such an answer. Obviously, we weren't very satisfied with that answer because we wanted the Rebbe's answer, not ours. And yet that's what the Rebbe wrote. And over time I realized that was the answer itself. It was saying, I am telling you to do that. That means I give you the strength to find the answer on your own. That's the real avoda. Not that you're really independent on your own, that you're given the blessings from Hashem and from the Rebbe to be able to answer those questions, but you have to put your effort to it. Because if not, then you don't have that He blesses, God blesses you in what you do, in your effort. But don't ever think it's the effort alone that does it. It's the blessing, but the blessing needs to work through our effort, even the ezbektana, small finger, some effort, something that we apply ourselves to be able to do, and then the blessing has a place to rest and to dwell and to be contained in the container, the keli that we make. So in that sense, that's what the Rebbe was writing to us. And perhaps one can say, since it was Baal Escha before Chav Zayin Adar, there would not be Baal Escha. The next year, the Baal Escha, we did not hear the Rebbe's words. Until this day, we have not yet heard the Rebbe speak again, physically. So perhaps the Rebbe was also saying something further, that, as he said, Chav Ches Nissen, I'm telling you, it's going over to you. You have to do something. So perhaps the Rebbe was giving keiches that I'm telling you that you have to make the effort to answer with the power that I've given you over all the years and continue to give you even till this day. So it's a constant combination of effort plus using our keich, plus the blessing that comes into that effort, and the effort being the container that draws the powers from on high. So it's always that mix that is necessary, which is, as I said, both sides to the picture. And this is essentially the whole concept of shlichus. A shliach is not an eved, is not a ben, is not a servant, and not a child. It has to be someone that is a bardas, an intelligent person who has independent intelligence, and yet chooses to become a shliach to the mishaleach, and that makes him shluchah shalom kameseh. You'd think it's a contradiction of terms. It's one thing you take someone that's not independent, a servant, kol masha koneh eved koneh rabbi, everything a servant owns and acquires, it's as if the Adon, his master, is acquiring it because he's an extension. A child is similar. A child is an extension of his father or parent. So why take the risk of someone that's independent and is a stranger? Yet that's what shlichus is. The purpose of the whole creation is to come down into this world and be at least ostensibly an independent entity. Not like a neshama that's gnuza tachas knisei kvedecha, which is a neshama that is up in heaven and senses its connection to its source, but to come into a world where we're made to forget the entire Torah that we were taught in our mother's womb. And it's a place where we can have, as I said, externally, a disconnection. And yet we choose, at our own volition and our own choice, avoda b'keich atzmi, to take the initiative. That's the entire purpose of it all. So essentially this captures the essence, especially in our generation, of the work that's necessary. That I wanted to know that it's always coming from a higher place, but sometimes that higher place comes in a revealed way, and sometimes that higher place requires us to make our effort, and it works through us. It works through our mind and through our emotions and through our so-called independent choices. But indeed, it's really just an extension of a higher force. And in many ways even deeper, because it's not just a puppet. It's not just an extension. It is an independent entity that chooses to be an extension of, and the arms and legs of, the Rebbe, of what the Heibershter wants us to fulfill in this world. So it's a tremendous lesson, also psychologically, in applied Chassidus. When you train people, when you educate people, when you try to inspire people, the key is not just to give them answers. The key is to put them on their own feet. Show them the methodology. Teach people how to take a situation, and they should be able to find answers. Obviously, we always could use an objective mashpia, an objective mentor. But the key thing is to teach people and empower them, not just to tell them what to do. And you'll find both with children and adults, when you use that method, it may be a derech harucha ktsara, a long and short road, but it always has longer term impact. And you know the person owns their choices. You know that you can trust and rely on them because they've internalized it. They haven't just done it as a favor to someone else, or because they were trained by someone else, or because they're under pressure or imposed upon by someone else. But machusei b'rotzen kibla aleim, that it's their desire, they own it, and make it part of who they are. As the Baal Shem Tov says on the word Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu Elokei Avram Yitzchak v'Yankov, why is it in that order? We say in Shemoneh Esrei, it should have first said Elokei Avram Yitzchak v'Yankov. First, God was the God of our patriarchs, of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. then Galakei Avesenu, and then Elokeinu. So he explains, when we're children, our parents give them the Elokeinu, teach us and educate us Elokeinu as Elokei Avesenu, what they know. And about Elokei Avram Mitzvah Yankov, that this is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it's our God, the parents' God, Elokei Avesenu. But when you grow into an adult, you have to make it Elokeinu comes first. You're worshiping a God that you have now owned, a God that you have now made yours. Not just you're worshiping the God of your parents. When I say God, own God, I didn't mean it the wrong way, that we own God. I mean to say that you own your choice of embracing Hashem Elokeinu, that He's your God, not just the God of your parents. You're not just going to a Seder table, or you're doing a mitzvah because your parents taught you to do it, or because they did it. You do it because Elokeinu, it's your God. You relate to this Hashem, and you relate to this mitzvahs to you, as if He's speaking to you, not like as He spoke to your parents and they told you the story, or He spoke to your grandparents and they told their children the story. But rather, it's like you were hearing the story directly. And then you also know it's Elokei Avesenu, and plus the Elokei Avram Mitzvah Yankov. So then you have all the milas, all the qualities as being Elokeinu, plus all the strengths that we get, b'schus avos, the merit of our parents, that comes all the way back to Avram Mitzvah Yankov and all the way back from the beginning of history. So now let's go to some questions that were asked. Let's start. Is there a deeper spiritual meaning in all sections of the Gemara? Is there an underlying spiritual message to be found in all of the Talmud, including sections that seem very dry and technical? The questioner spells it out. Hello, Rabbi Jacobson. Thank you for entertaining my questions and those of so many others who seek your thoughtful and soulful counsel. I'm in my first Talmud class and I'm enjoying it very much. We are studying Baba Metzia, page 22. It is a very legalistic verse, yet nevertheless I am enjoying the pilpul on the subject. Here specifically relating to ownership and yush, despair. Yush means giving up on something when you lost an object and you give up on it. I was thinking back to Elie Wiesel and how he comes to the conclusion that the opposite of good is not evil, but rather apathy. Playing on this thought, I came to think that perhaps yush, again, giving up, is the opposite of kavana, intention. It seems to relate to an apathy about a possession compared to even those who say they have no interest in some possession. Dafka, because they really do have their heart on that something. Perhaps I'm looking for some deeper spiritual meaning than what is there, but anyway, here goes the question. Can you look at passages as legalistic and grounded in everyday judicial issues, such as found in Bava Metzia 22, and find in them an inner Gemara? Is there an underlying spiritual message to be found in the driest sections of the Talmud that speak to an inner spiritual truth that we should be aware of in all Talmud study? May God bless you and keep you, sincerely. More, the same writer continues. Hello, Rabbi. I just wanted to see if I could suggest another inner thought, quote unquote, about Bava Metzia. It seems to me that ownership deals with yesh and the or surrounding it. It's if someone has energy associated with the object that has been in his possession, then is rightfully still his or hers. But if a person despairs from the object, that is, the person has no energy associated with the object, then it is open to being of yesh of someone else who does not have related to that object. Does that sound like a reasonable inner interpretation? The answer is absolutely yes. And let me begin with your first question, which is also absolutely yes. The Zohar says, in Parsha Ba'aloischa actually, that there is neshmasa daraisa and there's gufa daraisa. The soul, just like a human being has a body and a soul, just like everything in existence has a body and a soul, the Torah too has a body and has a soul. You can say Gemara in general is the mechanics and the body of Judaism, the halachas, the processing of how we got to these laws, the reasoning behind them, the way we derive them from their sources in the written Torah, and the whole pilpul, as you put it, the whole back and forth. However, there's a neshama. So neshama is not just a neshama. When you look at a body, you don't say neshama is only a soul of the mind or a soul of the heart. It's the soul from your head to toe. So neshmasa daraisa is the soul of head to toe, so to speak, of the entire Gemara. So there's no phrase, there is no line, there is no letter, there is no word, there is no idea in the Nigla the Torah that does not have a neshmasa daraisa that corresponds to it. So that's an unequivocal statement. They go hand in hand, soul and body, and you can't have one without the other to have the complete picture. Just like the soul also needs the body. And also you don't have a place where you say the soul is only here, and the body and the soul completely fuse in one seamless whole. The same as with the Shmosa and Gufa Daraisa, so every Gemara does indeed have an inner Gemara. As far as the topic of Yush, Chassidus does bring what you said and more, that yes, every person, when Hashem gives us, when we're born, and throughout life, all our acquisitions, all our property, everything that comes our way, halachically, that is if namuter, in a permissible way it belongs to us, means it is part of our domain, part of the sparks allocated to us to refine in this world. When a person loses an object, that there is a certain disconnect between them and their so-called the spark in that object. That's why it says, "Hama'abed mashanesim le ezu sheita hama'abed mashanesim." Who's the fool? The one that loses what is given to him. So Chassidus explains, Mashev them, he loses the spark within that lost item. And that's why there's a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, to return it to him because that's the rightful owner. Now, when there's a situation where he loses something to the point that there's Yush, where he's resigned and he gives up on it, then yes, it's very possible that that spark and that item goes over to the possession of another person who's found it, or possession of Bezdin, which is if it's like where nobody, that it's just given to the collective, basically something for Hegdish, for the Beis HaMikdash, or for some from collective or communal cause, and then it has essentially been transferred. And that too can happen willingly or it can happen not willingly. Here's not the place to go through the whole process, but yes, the idea is correct that you're saying, and the same is true, as I said, in every Talmudic idea. Good. Next question. Let me use this opportunity, if anyone has questions, any type of questions like this or others, controversial, personal questions that are very confidential, you can feel free to write in our forum, meaningfullife.com/MyLife. And there you have an ability to address anything, complete anonymous to us. If you want a response and you want us to have your email address because you're asking for a source, many of you have written to us for us to send you by email some of the letters I've read here on air. And I haven't given your email address, so we cannot respond to anonymous email unless you give us the email address in that forum. You just add your email address, please email it to me. So I just wanted to mention that. But in general, please use that forum to ask any questions. And thank you again for all the questions that keep coming in. And questions can also be new questions or previous discussed topics that need more clarification, or you have something you'd like to add, or you have another angle on it. By all means, this is a forum really meant to be collective. I'm just the so-called MC that tries to be the referee in communicating everything clearly as possible. But anything you can want to contribute, this is a great platform to do so, so please take me up on this invitation. So let's go now to another question. What is our attitude to self-affliction? Do we or don't we believe in depriving our physical bodies? So here we're talking about the concept of Yisurim or Sigufim, and which are essentially self-affliction. And the questioner in detail goes like this. There seems to be a disparity in Chassidus regarding self-affliction. Let me explain. Self-affliction is somebody in some way torturing or punishing themselves. The examples you find people rolling in the snow nakedly, or people who did other things that weaken their body, extreme fasting, and other types of segufim and tanesim and so on. So here seems to be the disparity this person writes. On one hand, the Rabbeim, beginning from the Baal Shem Tov, have taught us that our avoda today does not consist of weakening the Yetzer Hara by punishing or weakening our bodies. Absolutely. On the other hand, we find stories of the Rabbeim themselves afflicting their physical bodies as part of their avoda, of their service. Also, we find sources in Gemara clearly stating that being in a weak physical state allows for proper Torah learning. How do we reconcile the two seemingly contradictory approaches? Another person puts it a little differently, but the same idea. He asks the same question. He says, I've asked because I've never been able to reconcile a seeming contradiction. On the one hand, Chassidics makes it clear that one need not makes his body weaker, including taking on different fasts, rolling in the snow. One need not fight with darkness, but rather increase the light of Torah mitzvahs. And yet we find the Rabbeim who did take on fasts, the Baal Shem Tov, including our Rebbe, even though these were the ones who taught Klal Yisrael not to be involved in such conduct. I am not so bold as to say that this was incorrect conduct if our holy Rebbeim were involved in those acts. Far be it from me to say what they should or should not do. But the feeling I have always gotten is that Segufim were antithetical to Chassidus. Segufim is self-affliction. Why would the Rebbeim be involved in Segufim if they taught us not to be? Okay, very good question. Let me first begin with sources. So the first source, of course, is the Geras HaTshuvah, where the Alter Rebbe says specifically that we should not increase in Tainesim and Segufim. Let me give you the exact source. And of course, brought in many places in Chassidus, based on the Baal Shem Tov's Torah. Just give me a moment. I thought I had it open. Now, Geras HaTshuvah, I believe, well, you know what? I'm not going to give a chapter unless I have it open here, since I don't. Let's just leave it in the Geras HaTshuvah, where he says, B'zmanenu, we don't fast because we don't have the strength of the bodies. So instead, we should replace Atanis with tzedakah. I think it's chapter 3 in the Geras HaTshuvah. And we have, of course, the Baal Shem Tov's Torah on the Pasuk, Aziv Taziv Imei. So it says, Kisiras Chamer Senecha. If you saw the donkey of your enemy, it says in Parsha Mishpatim, so you would think that you should not help. So it says, Aziv Taziv Imei, you should help. So the Baal Shem Tov tries, Kisira Chamer Senecha, you see that your body, the chemer, the crassness of your physical being and body is Senecha, is your enemy. Because it leads you to temptation, and it has all kinds of ways of seducing and distracting you from avodas Hashem. So you would think that you'll ignore it and you should not deal with it. It says, Azav Tazavime, you have to work with it. Not through breaking it and not through breaking its back and through heavy load. So when you see that it has a heavy load, but on the contrary, you should help it and refine it and elevate it. And this becomes a foundation in Chassidus about not overdoing any type of overdoing, not through fasting and not through breaking our bodies, and particularly because in our day and age, the bodies are weaker and we don't have that ability. The Rebbe adds not only that, but also the avoda is not an avoda for our time, because you have to be on a high level to be able to do that and continue to do avodas Hashem and not just get weak and not to break yourself. And yet, yes, you do find the story, for example, of the Rebbe Marash himself, where the whole famous story with his servant, the person used to drive him, and they finally made him drunk, the Chassidim, and they found out, and they told the story, which the Rebbe Marash was very upset at him. They fired him afterwards, and then they reinstated him. It's a long story, but detail was that he told them that a strange thing, this Rebbe of yours. He takes me, he asked me to drive him somewhere. We go to the woods. He goes to a place. He opens up his shirt, a place with his mountains of ants, and then lets them climb onto his stomach. But he had open wounds, which of course are extremely painful. And then he, for a while, lets that happen. Then he closes it all up and goes away. Something a strange person, as he says in Russian there. And we see other stories similar. Even the Rebbe we know did fast, because we have a letter in the Igris of his father to the Rebbe telling him it's not the derech of Chabad to fast, and I hear you're fasting and continue to fast. That's not the derech. So you're accurate in saying it's not our business what the Rabbeim did. They taught us this. The Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaTshuvah, and what their business is their business, whether they're on their level and it's unique to them and not relevant to us. But regardless, there's no question that the avoda b'zmanenu is not sigufim. That is unequivocal. There's no exception. The fact that the Rabbeim themselves did it, I would say, is because they are unique on that level. There are things that are called a minig beis harav, so to speak. It's not minig beis harav. I wouldn't put it in that category, but the same idea that this is not meant for everybody. By the Seder, the Rebbe would say sometimes that certain customs were just the Rabbeim did that. So you can put that into that category. Why? Because the concept exists. You find in history you have this. You find in the Gemara, you said. You find it later. You find it. Now, important to point out, you find it by Yechidei Gula. Nowhere in Chumash does it say in Torah such a behavior. You don't find that a person goes and afflicts. As a matter of fact, you can say a chevel ba'atzmi, meaning somebody who in any way hurts himself. There's the laws of in the laws of not hurting yourself. You're not allowed to hurt your own body, because it's nechasav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the words of the Radbaz. It's God's property, so you can't mutilate yourself, you can't scar yourself, you can't cut yourself, and there's all kinds of real prohibitions. Now I understand Sigufim, obviously, the ones that did it were not Eva and the Torah, because they weren't necessarily destroying their body. They were punishing themselves, so to speak, to break their taivas or to break their hold of the physical body. Chassidim who slept on a bench, or other things that they weaken their body's hold. Because the Zohar says, "Tuk for the gufa, chulsha the nishmasa." The power of the body is stronger, the soul gets weaker. And tuk for the nishmasa, when the soul is stronger, the body is weaker. But then on the other hand, we have the expression from the Magid, in addition to what I said from the Baal Shem Tov, Oz is Tavz of Imei, to help and to not break the body through affliction, but to refine and transform it. You have the Magid Star, Al Klein Lechel in Guf is a Greis Aloch in Neshama. A small hole in the body is a great big hole in the soul. How do you reconcile that with the Zohar, Tuk for the Gufa is Chulsha the Nishmasa? The answer is, Tuk for the Gufa means that the person whose his temptations and his taivas are very strong and his physical being is very strong. And his soul is therefore completely submerged in a person who's being mushka, is completely submerged in taivas. On the other hand, to go break a body, the body itself is a dover kodesh. The Rebbe Rashab once rolled up his sleeve and said to his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said, Zevi Tayer, look how precious is the human body that the Eibush that Ejay Gossen Gans Teda mitzvahs for this hand, for this body. So to say that the body does not have gufa d'lehun kedusha, we say about the body of a Yid, not just the neshama, it's holy, it's sacred. The taivas are not sacred. The chumrius, the crassness, the extra indulgences are not. So when you talk about the extra indulgences, absolutely, that's called iskafia. That's not a contradiction. That means refraining yourself, disciplining yourself. But to go punish the body, that requires very unique situations, unique individuals who have the capacity to know what to do that is not also affecting the neshama. And for the rest of us, we have to maintain healthy bodies. And that doesn't mean indulgent ones, it means healthy bodies. You have to be a healthy person, not indulge, not overdo it. And yes, you have to maintain a healthy balance between the two. The segufim for those yechidus gula, those individuals, before the Baal Shem Tov was more, not common, but more common than it is today. Today it's much, much rare, and only for very, very unique situations of those who know how to keep that balance. And remember, by the Rabbeim, it wasn't because of chumrius and indulgences, it was relative to their level, whether it was because they were carrying the sins and the weaknesses of the generation, or it was because in their own Shad Hanun, that missing 50th gate, so they're missing they have the Chela Sava without the final, each on their level. Not necessarily, God forbid, in any way that is connected to anything that is crass or coarse. And for the rest of us, we have to continue to maintain the healthy balance, and that is the avoda of birur, not the avoda of shvira, meaning refinement, not breaking. But that doesn't mean you don't break a taiva and a desire and a temptation that goes into dvarim asurim for sure, that are not prohibited. And things even that are permitted, like we spoke about a few weeks ago, we spoke not everything, that which is not permitted for sure shouldn't be done. Even that which is permitted should also not be done. Kadesh atzmach b'muterloch, where we talked Kadesh atzmach b'muterloch, where we talked even in your things that are permitted, one should also sanctify themselves. That I defer to that discussion, that episode a few months ago, actually, I should say. So that's the response to this issue here. Next question. How is the mikveh tznius for young boys? Should we allow our young boys to go to the mikveh? We're so careful with inculcating our children with a healthy sense of tznius. As such, some parents feel very uncomfortable sending their young sons to the mikveh. How would you address this? Another person writes, I was listening to your recent podcast talking about the mikveh. I have a question about this. We are so careful with tznius and teaching tznius to our children. How is it okay for little kids to see men not wearing clothing and all going together into the mikveh? How is it okay? And how is it appropriate? Why can't each person go privately? I feel very uncomfortable with my young son going and seeing people like that, and I'm confused as to why it's acceptable. Thanks. Hi. I see that you're going to be speaking about this issue of young boys going to the mikveh. I'm not sure what age is called young. In any case, I'd like to share with you what Rav Heller told me. They've seen that the younger a kid starts going to the mikveh, the more of a chance they will not do it as they get older and as they go into the bacher years. Another question to consider aside from the Chassidic chinuch aspect is, even if a child is too young to tovel, to submerge in a mikveh? Is it okay for them to accompany their father under supervision, to just sit there like when a babysitter is not available, etc.? And he goes on and elaborates. Basically, if you start too young when they're not shayachted, they will reject it later on. So Rabbi Heller advises to start later on. Based on that, what I have done is start taking children at age 8, but I have to take them to shul in the morning. But if I have to take them to shul in the morning, when for whatever reason my wife is not home or cannot watch them, I do enter them enter the mikveh as I personally think, and that way it's normal to them and not a totally strange thing at age 8 or 9. Also, I would assume the questions about every Erev Shabbos or Shabbos morning when the kids are with their father. But regarding the weekdays, I've seen various families vary. Some will start as Hanachas Tefillin, putting mikveh, some later and some earlier. However, it's important to note that under a certain age, they should not be allowed to go without their father or legal guardian. Vidal, thank you. Okay, so thank you for that comment, which just came in today. So I'll take it from there. Yes, first of all, I have not seen any hiros, directives from the Rabbeim on this matter, but I totally agree. First of all, that at least sending a child to a mikveh is on their own is absolutely not acceptable, especially in the climate and world which we live, unfortunately. And regardless, there are certain boundaries in certain ways. I don't know if there's an exact age. I think parents have to take discretion. Maybe it's good to consult also with the yeshivas, because in yeshivas, there's a certain age where it becomes acceptable, usually after bar mitzvah. Before that, who says you have to take your children to the mikveh? Maybe out of Yom Kippur. But regardless, no matter, for sure, completely under supervision of a father. Absolutely not in any other way. And even there, I don't think you have to schlep your child to the mikveh like a super babysitter and have the child just sit there. It could be confusing. I would not suggest that at all. I think just as a child grows of age, especially when they enter puberty, where there's already the issues of sexuality beginning to emerge, and other questions may come up. So you can easily explain to a child. Mikveh is the words habitl, is the word tefillah, is the letters habitl, means complete submergence. The human body, as I said, is a dover kodesh. It's a holy body. God gave us a holy body. So we submerge completely this holy body as the Kohanim did when they go into the Beis HaMikdash, as the Kohen Gadol did 7 days before Yom Kippur, and as we do before Yom Kippur. It's a way of sanctification. Water is a sanctifier, and you explain it. I think you have to focus completely on the positive, on this total submergence. Just like we submerge, yes, a keli in a mikveh. Why? Because that's what prepares it to become a keli that can be used in a kosher and a Jewish home. So the same thing, the human body is a way of preparing it for davening, or preparing it for a holy day like Yom Kippur, or for Shabbos, or for Yontif. There's that concept. I would break it in that type of level, where the child understands. Just to expose a child to a mikveh without that, and children too young, is very confusing, and I agree with Rabbi Heller that it probably will be a negative, not a positive, because it may create confusion and may not really understand it. It has to be seen as a mature type of thing that a child relates to. Just to schlep a child to the mikveh, I don't see any benefit in that. Again, I don't see a directive, but this is more based on common sense, and as I said, always under the right supervision. Just like Hanochas Tefillin, it's true, a few months before bar mitzvah. Fine, so it's in the bar mitzvah age. That's the general response. And above all of all, this is not just a ritual, a mechanical. It should be very clearly explained what this whole point is. Why a mikveh is special water. It's not like a bathtub. It's not like a sea. It's not like a lake. Even though you can go to the mikveh technically there. But a mikveh is a particular requirements, what makes it a place that gives you kedusha. And explaining what is kedusha. The sanctity around the human body, all of the body, including the sexuality, but also all of the body. And that's how it should be explained. And if you can explain it, that's the age when the child should go. That would be my opinion. I'd love to hear from others, especially if you have some directives or specific guidelines from the Rebbe or anything else that you may want to add to it. Please do so at meaningfullife.com/mylife. Next question. Is it important for parents to demand validation from children? Dear Rabbi, your lectures are soul-satisfying as well as intellectually and emotionally stabilizing and reaffirming. May you go l'chayil l'chayil, from strength to strength. As a mother who watches these videotapes and mother of adults who also set stock in them, I wish you would say something about parents needing validation too. Not to whine, but I grew up in the ayin hara mentality. Children were not praised, hugged, or kissed. So I especially raised my children with open affection and what you call validation. Security, quote unquote, security was key. In fact, from the age of learning to talk, my little ones knew the word sincure. All this demonstrative behavior was sincere, as I adored, respected, and believed in them. To this day, now in my 80s, I still live independently out of state and try not to interfere or be a burden. Not that I act long-suffering or play the martyr, but simply thoughtful and polite, realizing that my adult children have their own lives and their own familial concerns, while living in a world much more complex than my generation's. If my self-description is self-praise, sorry, is the truth. Nevertheless, sometimes I will get a harsh or impatient tone of voice. I know the cause most of the time, but it still hurts and makes me feel our relationship insecure. Qualifying the definition of home is where if you go there, they will always take you in. Then the definition of the family should be those who, when you greet them, will always answer with gladness at seeing you or hearing your voice. Yet, yes, this has been discussed between us, but perhaps if you say it, ... thank you. Well, I believe I spoke on this topic as well. But regardless, it's always good to review some matters. Validation goes all around. Obviously, maybe the first place it begins with is parents to children, because children are defenseless. They're formative years, they're defenseless. They're shaped by everything around us. So being so vulnerable and being so impressionable, it's critical that they be validated, and we see the damage done when they're not. So that's a given. That's what I speak about very often. But validation goes on all levels, adult to adult. There's halachas that say when you're in the middle of davening and you meet someone, comes over to you, shalom aleichem, who greets you, who you haven't seen in a while, in most parts of davening, you're supposed to stop the davening and greet them. There's a terrible thing to ignore a human being, which of course emphasizes Meklal Lava to Shemei Hein, the positive and the power of validating each other. Simple menschlichkeit. When I heard a few weeks ago, I mentioned it here, I believe, someone told me, why don't people say Good Shabbos to each other in Crown Heights or in other Jewish communities? It breaks your heart. You saw the Rebbe said Good Shabbos to everybody. Good Shabbos, normal basic greeting. And when he said Good Shabbos to someone, they said, do I know you? Are we related? So let's not focus on the negative. The positive validation is all around, because we validate the divine image in which every human being was created. Besides the menschlichkeit of simply greeting somebody and recognizing that they exist. Now, this of course goes, as I said, strangers to strangers, and for sure children to parents. So just like parents have the mitzvah, but even beyond the mitzvah, the foundational requirement to educate and validate and affirm and reinforce their children, children have the same responsibility as adults, as parents get older, and yes, the children leave home. The parents are also human beings. Why shouldn't a child call their parent from time to time, if not more often? Sometimes you never know. Don't think your parents are just an invulnerable human being, and because they were a super father or super mother, that they don't need their validation, they don't need the love, they don't need just to say hello. Not necessarily that they'll be resentful if you don't do it, but again, it's the menschliche thing to do, and especially as you get older, parents can be very lonely. Now, of course, we're talking a situation which I'm very glad to hear, that this parent is not meddling and understands very well that children need their space and so on. But this is basic menschlichkeit and common sense that people should have all around, adults to children, children to adults, adults to adults, children to children. There's no one that's exempt of this idea of validation. We learn actually from Avram Avinu, where he turns away from Hashem to greet the nomads, Arabs, that he thought were Arabs, traveling in the wilderness. Receiving guests is greater than receiving the Shekhinah, which we discussed a number of times. I don't need to go over it again, but just to show you the importance of the validation, the importance of the welcoming, the importance of respecting the dignity of every human being. So yes, so here I say it openly and clearly, and it's not just me, this is coming from the Torah, This is a basic principles of Yiddishkeit, basic principles of Menschlichkeit for that matter, and to everyone and everyone. The Rebbe greeted everyone, and this is Jew and non-Jew alike. The basic Kiddush Hashem you make when you show someone, you say good morning to them, you greet them, you say hello, whatever it is, that greeting that you say in every given situation. Besides everything else, as I said, the Kiddush Hashem and it is also a critical component. Okay, next question, intermarriage. What role should a family play in addressing a family member considering intermarriage, God forbid, or one who is already intermarried? Should we be actively opposing it and encourage divorce if the couple is already married? It is a mitzvah to discourage intermarriage and to stop a couple from being wed. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, another question in this vein. I have family and friends married to non-Jews. My questions are, 1, should we always try to make peace between husband and wife even if one of them is not Jewish? Is it a mitzvah, or what's the right attitude? 2, is it a mitzvah to try to avoid a marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew? What's the best way? If the answer is to ask a third person to talk to one of them, is there anybody you know who's good at doing this? All I can do is send anonymous articles from different websites because I don't want to fight with my family members or friends. Thank you very much. Best regards. Okay. So firstly, we've discussed this topic, and I want to refer you to episodes 21, 63, 96, and 98, which are all in the archives, which are now 165 episodes strong, which you can find at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. So we've discussed the topic, you see, in 4 different episodes already. Being that it is unfortunately a reality, let me address it again, and perhaps with another angle, but everything I say is complementing this, which we already discussed. So I'm not going now to the whole lengthy discussion. I'm just going to focus on these questions. Intermarriage, as the Rebbe makes it very clear, and it's clear from Torah, is a tragedy for both parties, both for the Jew and the non-Jew. This isn't just a Jewish tragedy. Let's start with that. Because there are things that God is the one that created human beings. God is the one that created intimacy and sexuality. God has created men and women. God created Jews and non-Jews. And God, and only God, knows what is the right combination in chemistry. This does not reflect on whether people are good people or bad people, whether people have good intentions or bad intentions. This is all about where marriage appropriate. Why is marriage? Why do we get married? Not just because it's a contractual agreement. It's because there's kedushin, there's sanctity to it. And if you want the third partner and the sanctity, you want it to be done the right way. If you need explanation why dafka Jew to Jew and non-Jew to non-Jew, that I refer you to these other episodes that I just mentioned, 21, 63, 96, and 98, and to other good books that have been written on the topic. You can find plenty out there. I know plenty, but definitely a few good books out there. But the bottom line is, that's what it comes down to. So obviously, if you love somebody, and it's a family member, or it's a stranger, and you have ability to have influence, obviously you should try to dissuade it. The best way to dissuade is preemptive. Preventive medicine is not even allow someone to consider it in the first place, which means if you have the proper education, Jewish identity, some people are just not shaykh. They're not going to do that. They understand the importance of marrying a Jew, even if they may not know other laws. But the more Jewish identity you infuse in a child, the more Jewish awareness, the less likely that they will consider intermarriage. If you are familiar with a situation like that, and whatever reason it's already come to that point, but it's not yet concluded, they're not married, then of course if you can dissuade, you can dissuade. But here's the big qualification. You have to be capable. You have to be in a position where you have the trust. Just to go ahead and be a destructive influence and they'll just turn people off, or they won't want to talk to you, what's the point? So this isn't just about getting up with a sledgehammer and just knocking on people's head. If you have a friend that you can speak that way, by all means. So you have to assess your capacity to actually influence. And what way to influence? Sometimes it's more through subtle influences. Maybe it's through discussions. Maybe it's through pleasant communication. It could be through sharing a book, sharing ideas. All depends on the circumstance of where the person is at. If they're considering it, or even if they're not considering, but you think they may, always best to have this conversation before they get emotionally involved. I'm just going through the stages of this. Preventive, as I said, is the best. The second is this type of somewhat preventive. If a person is already emotionally engaged with someone else, then it gets much harder because there's the subjective arguments that they will make, and it won't be that easy because they'll say, I love that person. Love conquers all. So there again, you have to know two things. You need to know where they stand and how you can communicate with them. And two, your role. Are you the right person? And maybe someone else may have a better way, a better sprach, a better way to communicate them, and they have more trust. That's what you have to look for. Sometimes it's good to have a stranger and not a family member because they may be too close for comfort. And there are good people to go to and speak to. If anyone has the situation would like to consult with me, I would suggest calling me or emailing our office and give us your contact information. I can give you some advice once I hear more details and perhaps guide you where you can go, who you can speak to, and what can be helpful in that circumstance. If it's already an intermarriage, that's already happened, so there, of course, it's even more involved and engaged. So there's no reason to be supportive because it's not something that's good for them. They may not be able to hear it yet. At the same time, there's no reason to go fight with everybody. So here again, case by case, to have to know that I'm not going to get into discussion, should you go to their wedding or not. I discussed that back in those episodes. That's much more complicated because you don't want to endorse it. On the other hand, you do want to leave a door open if you have influence, if you're a parent or you have a family member. So that I defer to the other programs that I did on this topic. So that's the general approach to this. And more, as I said, go back to those episodes. We will do now 2 follow-ups. Then we'll do the Chassidus question, and then we shall go to the essays. Make sure I have everything covered here. Good. We talked about enjoying God's world back in episode 161. So here's a follow-up question. Dear Rabbi J, does the fact that this class, this MyLife class, even exists, never mind the content, brings huge amounts of hope to many who hear about the class, who have suffered much from being exposed to misuse and misunderstanding of Chassidus. May this class continue to be discovered and listened to by the many that need it. Sometimes I'll find myself tearing up as I listen to different explanations and clarifications like crumpled pieces of paper being opened up, smoothed out and reread with proper emphasis and understandings. That the healing that your class brings, I imagine, must play a very significant role indeed in bringing back the Shekhinah into this world. Well, thank you so much, with many exclamation points. I want to comment on tonight's class, which was referring to episode 161. Tonight's class question about using the pleasures of this world to serve Hashem, and share my recent understandings of pieces of Chassidus, which perhaps takes this concept to the next level. In a Sikha on Tu B'Shvat from 1988, which Jem published over a year ago, titling it The Pleasure Principle, the Rebbe explains the need to use the pleasures of this world every day in order to overcome our whole heart. I skipped the line. To use the pleasures of this world every day in order to overcome our limitations. The Rebbe points out, if I have understood correctly, that one can do avoda with their whole heart, but if this element of pleasure is not included, then our avoda is not complete. And the Rebbe explains, including this highest faculty of pleasure, which is outside us, takes us to new heights of being able to overcome our limitations. What I find amazing is how the Rebbe also fits this into the infrastructure of the Shema, B'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha, that we serve Hashem with our intellect and emotions, uv'chol meidecha, when the dimensions of pleasure. My question has been how can we understand the dance between iskafia and ishapcha? Iskafia means refraining, ishapcha means transforming or harnessing, as a concept. In practice, as you say, we get guidance from Mashpia. When to abstain even though the pleasure is permitted. Abstain, right? Better than refrain. Like the Chassidim you mentioned who chose to eat just a crust of bread, and when to receive this pleasure from Hashem and use it in our service of Him. One explanation I heard, which I would love to hear your opinion on, is that the collective iskafi that was accomplished over time has significantly subdued the sitra achra at large, and therefore we have progressed to a new era of being able to access the imprisoned eris, lights and energies in the gashmias, and finally elevate them, thus the era of ishapcha. In this light, doesn't it seem that using the pleasures of this world in service of Hashem is not just appropriate, but critical in getting us over the finishing line to the Geula? I'll use the name of this person because they signed it, Mrs. Chavi Epstein, Columbia, South Carolina. Okay. So firstly, thank you so much for your beautiful, kind words. I hope I live up to them. And may you continue to use this material in that same spirit, spreading these ideas which is Chassidus, to as many people as you can reach. I do agree with this point. I believe that it's based on sichos from the Rebbe and generally sichos Chassidus in general, which is we are stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's correct to say that accumulatively, the avoda in previous years, we spoke about sigufim earlier, self-affliction and other things, we were yates to that part. We were yates to many things, as the Rebbe said, including much of the abstinence with that type of power. And today, yes, we do live, you see, God blessed us with a mitzvah, not of Mitzrayim, but we have the golus of Ashur, of abundance and opulence and prosperity. There was a golus of Mitzrayim in the previous generations. So today, yes, the avoda is more isapche than iskafia. That doesn't mean there's no room for abstinence, everyone in their own level, but collectively speaking, yes, it's more on the transformational level, especially as we get very close to the Gula, the Giluyim that we have, the comforts that we have, the ease of life, the standard of living are all given to us, that should be b'chol d'rachecha de'ah, that we should use it for holy and higher purposes. So pleasure should be transformed and not just abstain. But again, as we discussed, you have to know the balance in your own life. Each situation case by case. But collectively, yes, I agree with that. And the rest is discussed back in episode 161. There's no reason to add to that. So with that, let us go over to one more thing about applying Chassidus, another follow-up. The question was, we were talking about MyLife Chassidus applied in light of the Frierdiker Rebbe's letter about the misuse of Chassidus, so we already explained that properly. But there was a follow-up that wrote the following. In regard to the question about the validity of the Chassidus applied broadcast, I recently learned in Sefer HaSichos 5748, Tovshin Memches, Parshas Hazirim Etc., where the Rebbe gives an explanation of the first mission of chapter 2 of Pirkei Avos. I feel this may further the discussion. Yes. What does he say there? That in addition to Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messina in chapter 1, once we've learned that, that's Nasa, Kaidin Lanishma. Then comes chapter 2, it says, Rebbe Eimer Ezu Derech Sheyover Mina Adam, which is the path that a person should choose, Tiferes Leiseh, something that's beautiful for him and beautiful for others. And the Rebbe asked the question, what do you mean? The path should be the path of Torah. The Rebbe explains, no, but we have to then apply it in a way that's actually beautiful to us and beautiful to others, obviously based on the Kabbalah sale of Nasa and Nishma as explained in that sikh. So that's a good point. There's more, but we will leave some for the next episode. So let us go now to the Chassidus question. The Chassidus question of the week is as follows. Can you please clarify what is the primary avoda for this generation? In one place in Tanya, he says that prayer is the primary avoda of our times. That refers to Kuntra Sachrin, Love and Inyam Hashakosov B'Priyetz Chaim. I'll give you an exact page. That is page 155a. And then later, Hechiach Techiach, at the end, on page 162a. And he cites there the Priyetz Chaim, which is the first gate, chapter 7. Saying that the primary avoda of this generation is prayer. In another place, Ageres HaKedah Siman Tes, he says it is tzedakah, charity. Which one is it? What is the most important service to Hashem to be involved in pre-Messianic times? And the person writing said that he once spoke to Maran Hagon of Aaron Soloveitchik, who told me he had the same problem. The person writing said, I had some Talmidei Chacham in Chabad, I had a Chavrus in Eretz Yisrael in 1972, and I have not received one answer. Perhaps we should work on both. So the person who submitted this question responded to this individual, and I'll read his response, and then I'll add my few points to this. In the first place, if I understand correctly from where this rabbi is quoting from the Tanya, the quotes are not 100% accurate. In chapter 9, the Ageres HaKedah, the Alter Rebbe says, Kol Ikar Avodas Hashem, in these times, the Ikvus of the Mashiach is Avodas HaTzedakah. So Kol Ikar Avodas Hashem. In Kunter Sachrin, cited earlier, the Alter Rebbe says, Bizman Hazeh Ikar Abirur Al Yidei Tefillah Dafka. Tanya is referred to the Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus, the Bible, the Torah, the written Torah of Chassidus, meaning every word is b'diuk, is precise. So I'm suggesting the answer to this question is likely found in explanations of Chassidus of the differences between Ikar avoda, the primary service being tzedakah, and Ikar abira, the primary refinement being tefillah. Okay, that's an interesting diuk. One difference, as explained in Chassidus, is that avoda tzedakah is amshachim on ma'ila lamata, is drawing down from the top down. So he cites a Geras HaKedesh chapter 21, quoting the Hainu, Shepulosa v'zgulosa lahamshech chayim elyenim mechaya chayim. That is pula, its effect and its gula and its properties is to draw down. The birr by prayer, the refinement of prayer, not avedus as talking about birr, is halah, is elevating from below up, which is the inyan of tefillah b'mkeim karbonis, prayer in place of offerings, where karbonis offerings were done lamata, and the smoke rose up to create a reach nechayach lamayla. The smoke rose to create a beautiful aroma above. And I agree that the rabbi's conclusion is correct. We should work on both. Okay, this good point's made. However, it still doesn't tell us which is which. We should work on both, but is one of them more primary than the other? Or is it two primary elements? One is called birr, one is called avoda. So here's what I would add to the equation, and I wrote this to them, so I'll read what I wrote. In addition to your point distinguishing between ikar birr and ikar avoda, I would add, why can't you simply say that there's more than one avoda in these times? In the days of Ikvus and Mashiach, meaning the last days before Mashiach. Prayer and tzedakah. Another point I'd make, look at the Rebbe's notes at the beginning of the Kuntres Achronim, the two Kuntres Achronims I referred to, 155a and 162a, explaining why prayer, more than Torah, is today's primary birr. Because A, it changes the physical world, prayer does. And B, that is needed today more than ever because the Stalkus HaMeichin gets stronger in our times, because in Golus, as the divine intellect gets more removed, the more we need prayer to draw down the Meichin. The more we need prayer to draw down that intellect. He also compares it to the advantage of tzedakah over Torah. The Rebbe compares it of tzedakah over Torah in the Geras HaKedesh we're addressing here, sections 5 and 9, which suggests that prayer and tzedakah go hand in hand in our work today to transform the lowest levels of Maisa, as the custom is to add tzedakah before and throughout tefillah. So you could actually say they complement each other and both are part of the same thing. Then I actually found a letter from the Rebbe dated 25th of Iyar, Tavshin Yotes, where he speaks about this topic, and he says, well, the Rebbe is referring to the birr of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya and Kuntres Achronim, and explaining the words of the Arizal, the Bizman Hazeh, in our times, the Ikar HaBirr, the main refinement is through prayer. And the Rebbe says, look also in the Geras HaKedesh test, says Razal say, Talmud Torah Shokol, but Yamayhem. That was in early days. But today, in Ikvus of the Mashiach, stuck is the thing. And the Rebbe quotes a Rashi in Shabbos, Taf Kuf Chav Zayin Beis, 127b, Tefillah b'kav gemilas chasadim. That prayer is in the same line as gemilas chasadim. K'meshakosov geimol nafshe ish chesed. So there you have a reconciliation, because prayer actually is called a form of tzedakah. So that's what I would comment. And again, if anybody has additional components to this or additional comments, please address them, send them to us. Now to the 3 essays, which we're doing from this week's contest, from this year's contest, I should say, which are, again, excellent essays. And I want to repeat this again and again. These are all in the top 25 essays, and they are all literally decimal points away from one another. So they all could have been easily the winner. And as I read these essays, I see that very clearly. So the first one is Wanting Desire by Mushka Silverbrook, 20 years old, Chicago, Illinois. I was very impressed with this essay. Pulling oneself out of bed at the command of the 6 a.m. alarm clock is never easy. Most people want to be successful and productive, but when the daily grind hits, many cannot gather the motivation to actually do what they must. While they understand the negative results of not accomplishing tasks, somehow this doesn't seem to motivate them to do things that they don't like. Chassidus teaches that one primary point is missing in people who are not motivated, revealed rotzen, will, desire. Throughout Chassidus, rotzen is described as an essential and powerful force so strong that if channeled correctly, will impel people to do whatever it takes to fulfill their desires. It motivates them to do their daily important jobs, not because they have to, but because they want to. In this essay, I will attempt to explain parts of the Frierdiker Rebbe Maimorim, part of the Maimer Yom Tov Shlosh and Tafrei Samar Vav from the Rebbe Rashab, and part of Bosel Gani Tafshin Lamed Zayin from the Rebbe, to answer the question, how can I motivate myself to want to do my daily jobs? This is coming from a 20-year-old, mind you. And goes on to beautifully explain defining Rotzen. What Rotzen is based on Chassidus. Rotzen being desire. Its essential nature, she talks about its main characteristic and its strength, and its dominance over the other powers of a person. 3 bullets. And then continues to describe, based on this Chassidus, of how one creates a Rotzen. How actually one can create a desire for something. And then, with practical steps, write down the problem. Step number 2, inner awareness. Step number 3, das, creating desire, with an entire chart of how one can apply desire, essential desires, analyzing your chart, reminders are 5, and how we can actually create desire and overcome that type of apathy or lethargy. Beautiful essay in motivation based on true Chassidus sources. I must say, very, very impressive. Okay. Next. The next essay is How to Kick Bad Habits to the Curb by Rivka Shanowitz, 22 years old. Teacher and communications director in Chabad of Westmount, Montreal, Quebec. And I'm so impressed by the ages here and the mature ability to do this. What can I say? I mean, this is exactly the whole purpose of it all. To take Chassidus and apply it to real life challenges, amazing. Rivka Shanowitz, so here's what she writes. Preface. What is a habit? A habit is a routine behavior that is followed regularly to the point that it becomes involuntary. This behavior then gets stored in the basal ganglia, I hope I pronounced that right, the subconscious. There are many pop psychology books today that deal with overcoming habits. Luckily for us, we have age-old sources in Torah and Chassidus that give us the tools to deal with any challenge, bad habits included. Much of the Rebbe's directives concerning chinuch were directly related to habit forming. When you train a child to practice positive habits, such as washing negelvas, saying 100 brachos a day, it will enter their subconscious in such a deep way that it becomes their second nature. In a Sikha, she quotes a Sikha Shabbos Pasha Chayesara Tovshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe spoke about training young children to say 100 brachos a day, so that it will be something that will come easily to them when they are chiyuv and responsible in Torah and mitzvahs. In this essay, I put forth a 5-point plan based on the beauty and practicality of Chassidus and how to get rid of a bad habit and replace it with a better one. It begins with number 1, make a cheshbon hanefesh, with quoting the details. I'm not going to give you all the details. That you can read this essay and all essays at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. As well as if you subscribe to our emails, we send out the new essays as they're published. So point number 1, which is allowed, make a cheshbon hanefesh. 2, a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. 3, trag gut v'zayin gut. 4, mashpia. 5, amuna. And as extra points in these essays, which are deserved, comparative research to the power of habit by Charles Duhigg. Very well done in this comparative study, and you see the beauty and power of Chassidus. Can I say? Excellent essay as well. And essay number 3 is The Dynamics of Happiness by Rafi Shemel. 19 years old, Aholotei Zal, Toronto, Ontario. So the 3 essays, 20 years old, 22, 19 years old, in the top 25 essays. The current age, this person writes, seems to be fraught with a strange paradox. On the one hand, never before has there been such an abundance of material wealth, prosperity, technological development, and medical breakthrough. And on the other hand, yet simultaneously the rate of depression and unhappiness is higher than ever, and quotes different studies. This essay will shed light on the above questions, primarily based off a short and concise maimer of the Alter Rebbe. What are the questions? Why is that? Why are people still unhappy despite living lives that their ancestors never dreamed of living? Based on a maimer, Maimorim HaKetzarim, which is tremendous, to take a maimer that is really unknown, and besides revealing that maimer, also using it in this way, which is titled, Maimer Ketzarim, one of the original short Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe in the early years, That's a Maimer titled Simcha. That's its title, happiness. This essay will explain a section of the Maimer as well as the Chassidic concept of the duality of human nature. Based off this, the essay will offer an explanation as to why those living in our age and culture are more prone to unhappiness and offer solutions to help counter this problem. And the essay begins with understanding happiness. Happiness is thrown around very often. What does it really mean? There are all kinds of meaning people give to happiness. And the Alter Rebbe explains happiness on the most fundamental level. He says that on an abstract level, every living being has an ingrained state of happiness. No matter what kind of living creature it is, whether it is vegetative, animal, or human, every creature was created to naturally be in a state of happiness, well-being, and contentment. To put it simply, happiness is not an acquired feeling, but rather a natural one built into the genetic makeup of every creature. The only question is how to tap into it and access this feeling. The Alter Rebbe explains that this feeling can be accessed when the creature has found its root. It can be accessed when the creature is found in its roots. In simple terms, this would refer to the creature's natural habitat. That happiness, in other words, is when any creature, is in its own natural habitat. When a creature is found in its natural habitat, it will naturally be happy. Thus, the way to access this feeling is by allowing the giving being to be in its natural state, its true self. If the creature senses that it is not in touch with its true self, it is not able to truly experience happiness. Tremendous concept from the Alter Rebbe. And he goes on to explain different creatures and different beings, and obviously, ultimately, understanding our own animal soul and understanding the divine soul. When you know who you are, then what is your natural habitat? And that's the place where you'll find your happiness. So I'm not going to give away the rest of it. You can look it up yourself. As I said, applying it to our lives, but a tremendous essay as well. All three of these, top notch. And with that, let us conclude this episode, as we always do, which is, 1 second please. Sorry about that. That this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied episode 165, Shabbos Pasha Ba'aleischa this week, rising on our own. I hope I covered topics that are relevant to all of you, just as they've been relevant to me. And please send in your questions and comments. Every Sunday we're here from 8 to 9 p.m. And so until next Sunday, everyone should have a very blessed week. It should be a avoda dika week, avoda b'koyach atzma dika week, and a week of geula, amitis v'ashlema.